he asked me to say, in introducing him, that he's been involved in the civil rights movement since the late 1950s, and he was last arrested in Whitehall during a non-violent civil disobedience demonstration for disabled rights in October 1994. Anyway, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mike, who is going to talk about not just cellular automata, but also the broader picture of evolution, chaos, or causality.
Good evening. Oh, good. You can hear me. Most of the things that I was going to say in the first 5 seconds, John has very kindly said. But not the only thing I'd like to say before we look at the first video is this: that I've nearly always worked in teams, and I mentioned quite a few people's names throughout this. And I really do want you not to get the impression that all of the stuff I'm going to show you is my own work, and that there are lots of people involved, some of the technicians who get very, very good credit. So I think it's quite important to make sure that you just hear their names once. I'd like to start off by showing you a video of an experiment. If you can play the first video.
There's a few more seats at the front.
In the video we've just seen, the blue mesh represented an infected population. And the yellow upright poles represented a deadly plague. What we learned from this experiment was that if a population can avoid extinction from a plague if it changes its habits faster than the virus mutates. The video was made by Johnny Sheriff and Chris Osland at the Rutherford Laboratories from the output of a computer model based on cellular automata. What is relevant here is not the very heartening theoretical result itself, but the means used to make the model. And that's what I wish to bring to your attention. It's an extraordinary fact that although the superficial aims of this experiment that we just saw and research into evolutionary architecture are very different, but the means employed in that research are very similar. This correspondence of methodology is not a rare and thus trivial coincidence. The breakthrough in the travelling salesman problem announced this month by Dr. Sarah Amin uses cellular automata and Darwinian evolution. So we might ask, what's going on? What links these apparently disparate studies? I'm going to turn this on so I really when I use it. I think they're linked by space and information. The idea of access to space simplifies these concepts. The travelling salesman is looking for the shortest path between cities, minimum effort access. In the video of the plague model, we were looking at another kind of space, behavior space, and at another kind of access, the opportunity to infect. It's not hard to see why these new tools, which deal with these formerly mathematically intractable situations, are also being investigated by architects. By way of example of what I mean by spatial information, we might briefly examine the contemporary understanding of entropy. The laws of entropy govern the way energy behaves in space. The theory of entropy tries to show, for instance, why light streams out of a light bulb rather than just hanging about inside. Essentially, the laws of entropy say that energy will migrate from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration at a rate proportional to the difference between the two. Quite a few people consider the law of entropy to be the most profound of all human intuitions about the nature of the universe. In practice, the model of the law, a short and very elegant differential equation, predicts that a hot object, and I have here an object which I'm going to ask you if you will imagine is hot, okay, that a hot object will cool like this. That's to say, the start off as a high temperature, and its temperature will drop at a gradually decreasing rate until it becomes in thermal equilibrium with its environment. Okay. However, this is true only for the average temperature of this object. What actually happens is that the corners cool faster, and the complex temperature gradients are set up during the cooling. No point on the piece of iron actually has the predicted temperature history. The temperature curve at any point will actually look something like this. Okay? Okay. If you take space into account in your model by using, for instance, a cellular automata, rather than a formula that presumes one-dimensional space, the picture is quite different. Formerly invisible structures emerge. The model becomes more lifelike. What then is a cellular automata, and what is Darwinian evolution, and how can we combine them to learn about spatial information? Cellular automata are sufficiently straightforward that in their simplest form they are true. Now, I suppose it's only fair to admit that almost everything else about them, except their most simple details, is utterly and totally mind-boggling. We're going to stick to the simple details. So, away we go. Okay. Lost my place. Right, here we are. Gel 1. There are three simple rules to the game of cellular automata. We start with a grid. Because we're interested in the contents of the space between the lines rather than the lines, we call the grid a set of cells. That's rule 1. That's rule 1. That's the board defined. The second rule of the game is that each cell has a value. That could be 0, it could be 98.4, it could be anything. In our case, it's going to be either dark or light. Any set of values is legal in the cells. That's one of the charms of cellular automata. Playing the game involves producing a new line of cells with values from a starting line of cells with values, using the same simple formula to determine a new value in each cell. This formula, which determines the cell's value, takes into account the value of the cell and the value of its nearest neighbors. That's the third and last rule. Now there's a cell, and there's its nearest neighbor. Now I must say to you, this is only true for the most simple cellular automata. Actually, there are no rules at all, but this works very well, and it's very, very simple. Now I've put the rule that we're going to use underneath. But before we actually talk about the rule, let's see if we can't have a look at a bit of a cellular automata, which is labeled off. Is it possible? Yes, wonderful. Yeah. That's the last rule. Now, here's a line with a single cell which has a dark value and the rest are all light. Now we produce a new line with a simple rule. In our case, the rule is this. Stay the same if your neighbours change. Let's stay, in our case, stay the same if your neighbours are the same. Change if your neighbours are different. That is, if both your neighbours are white, stay white. But if one of your neighbours is black and one is white, then change to black. Thus, a new line emerges. And if we were to go very carefully through this, you would discover that the cellular automata actually obeys that rule of neighbours. I know that because I copied it out of the book. That's all there is to cellular automata. In its simplest form, it's a mathematical procedure that makes patterns. The reason that they let us draw wages for playing with these things is that despite the simplicity of the game in its simplest form, the patterns that it produces are profoundly mysterious. If you read the light squares as 0 and the dark ones as 1, then the top line spells out 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. Now that's binary 8. The next line spells out 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, which is binary 28. The next line 42, the next line 107, the next line 73, the next line 62, the next line 93. And then for some reason which nobody knows, the whole thing starts again. This simple procedure has given us a mathematically chaotic output, a sequence of random numbers. Now, although the output is random, it is paradoxically strongly patterned. Now, here, is any enough at all? Yes? No? You don't know. Here is another one. That's a page. Right. Here's a page from the book that me and Andrew Winter did. We've just examined a set, here. That is what we just looked at. Right? That cyclic attractor there. As I said to you, once you go away from the simplest things, this stuff gets really weird. Where are we? Atlas. Cycle here. Okay, now I've got a nice picture. This is just by way of entertainment. There's a nice picture in pseudo colour of some of these basins. These are more complicated little basins that you can just have a look at. This pattern and the implicit paradox of the patterning and the randomness provides a line of approach to these mysterious functions, and it caused me to think about spatial information. There's clearly no symbolic information in this one. Cellular automata make a bit more sense if you see them as geometric rather than numeric functions. After all, they work with colours or fruit machine symbols just as well as with numbers. From this point of view, cellular automata, acellular automata, is the evolution of a model universe. The laws of the model universe are determined by the rule in the cells. If you give the model rules about dark and light squares, you get out pleasant but meaningless patterns. If you're cunning with your rules, you can see in the model universe the spatial evolution of just about anything you can imagine. And so to Charles Darwin, who was cunning with rules about evolution. In 1859, Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species, in which he described the organization of nature as a natural, not a divine process. This produced a great deal of religious and ideological controversy, which is utterly irrelevant, and which I shall mention as rarely as possible, partly because I seem to have difficulty saying the word. Darwin observed that people are careful when selecting livestock for breeding, because they know that the characteristics of the parents are more or less inherited by their offspring. He supposed that variety amongst offspring was inevitable in the reproductive process of animals, and he concluded that the circumstances in which wild creatures lived would themselves provide a selection process, despite the fact that there were no farmers selecting the animals for breeding. That is to say, the young of a species born more or less varies. Sorry, that is to say that the young of a species are born more or less varies. Those which are likely to survive are more likely to breed and pass on their characteristics to young creatures possessing less appropriate characteristics. He called the process natural selection in contrast with the sort of selective breeding that people at that time were familiar with. This seems a plausible theory. It implies that an Arctic fox born with red and yellow day-glow fur will find it harder to kill and thus to feed a litter than a better camouflaged fox with a pelt of more modest hues. Of course, if the candy-striped fox falls into the hands of a fur farmer, its chances of breeding will be greatly enhanced. We'll look at that. Now, this is an illustration, as I say, I hope. Right, no face in technology at all now. Okay, this is good. This is very nicely. There we are. This is an illustration from The Origin of Species. So if anybody asks you anything about evolution, you can say yes, I'll see the origin of species. And this is how Darwin saw species developing, this kind of bifurcation diagram. Okay? Darwin's hypothesis is particularly remarkable in that he knew absolutely nothing about genetics. The work of his contemporary, the Augustinian monk Gregor Mendel, who laid the foundation of the science of genetics, did not emerge from obscurity until the beginning of this century. Extraordinary public relations happened there, which Darwin's theory has all the marks of a great scientific discovery, including simplicity. But it is, of course, as limited and incomplete and as flawed as anything else. He himself chose to stand back from the controversy that his work aroused. In this sense, he genuinely was hardly a Darwinian. I would like to look at three questions raised by what you might call the imperfections in his work. The first of these is the question, what is a species? Why do we have dogs which chew up your shoes and cats which scratch your furniture, yet no dats and cogs, which would exhibit a smooth, changing mixture of these behaviours? Why are there distinct species? Alternatively, why is the biosphere not entirely composed of a single species, perhaps a giant baobab tree? Darwin thought about this. He wrote that, now he didn't talk about dats and cogs, obviously. He wrote that dat and cog populations were not evident because they had been supplanted and improved by dogs and cats. He saw the lack of dat and cog fossils as, I quote, the most obvious and most forcible of the many objections to my theory. The question why speciation remains largely unanswered to this day. It's quite a good thing to ask biologists if you want to wind them up. There is a second, perhaps even more baffling aspect to this question of speciation. We can turn the whole problem on its head. Let me put it this way. Every outline implies an inline. Individual members of each species each have an outline. According to our way of talking about things, all these outlines are also the inlines of the place in which the creatures live, the background, the environment. The conventional way we talk about the environment is strangely similar to the way Darwin's contemporaries thought about women. Always there, not for any particular reason. Neutral, a space from which everything comes, but lacking qualities or desires of their own. Property to be owned, patronized. And as patrons of the environment, we have appointed a minister of the crown to deal with its problems. The final mad twist is that there's no such thing as an environment. Living creatures are open, not closed systems. Now, it is true that in the case of a closed system, the less that happens to it, the longer it lasts. A tin of baked beans would last forever in a vacuum at very low temperature. This is not true of living creatures, whose existence is not passive, but depends on a complex relationship with
other living things. Air is a good example of this complexity. We call it the atmosphere. We reckon it just sits there, gets itself all polluted up. Okay, two things about the atmosphere. One, it's part of the biosphere. It's inside you. It's part of you, the very breath you breathe. It's alive. Two, it's alive. Trees are made of it, plants are made of it, so are you. All flesh is grass. Remember? Apart from water, carbon is the largest single elemental constituent of an animal. Plants get their carbon from atmospheric carbon dioxide, animals get their carbon from plants. To some degree, we are made of air. It's really hard to know which bits of the world are not us. To summarize, we might say that we're not clear what we mean by a species, and for another entirely different set of reasons, we're not exactly sure what we mean by the environment. Okay. The third point about Darwin is somewhat obvious. Evolution is not over. The apparently banal suggestion that evolution is not finished has at least two separate charts. In the first place, it has a wicked effect on ideologists who want to draw conclusions. Secondly, if evolution is not over, then the object of evolution, fitness, successful adaptation to the environment, call it what you will, becomes a target which is not only moving, driven by chaotic boundary conditions, but also invisible, because no one can see what hasn't happened yet. There is no way that our mutant candy striped Arctic fox could have anticipated its future starring role on the fur industry. How then do species, whatever that means, prepare for an unknown future? And how can we, if we can get any idea how they do it, learn to do likewise? Indeed, can anything be learned in a universe whose chaotic transactions are inexpressible in simple everyday terms? That was the question that inspired my title. In answer, I would say that the study of the biosphere has much to give in addition to chemicals, drugs, and food. In the biosphere, we see simple, brilliant strategies. Darwin's theory is an example of the extraordinary insight that we natural creatures can have about ourselves. It is a profound intuition to understand that variation, mutation, or chaos, it's the same thing, is both the inevitable consequence of reproduction and the motor of evolution. Now, a vital quality of mutation during reproduction is that it is indiscriminate or chaotic. This indiscriminate behavior can equally well be described as searching or randomly exploring. The mutants, the lost ones, the errors blindly discharged into opportunities space are a library of alternative behaviors, templates carrying information which can allow the system to reconfigure itself in radically new ways in response to unknowable changes in the resources available. The rule breakers are the way that the system can go beyond itself, become capable of what it was not capable of. The rule breakers, nature's mistakes, are performing the seemingly impossible task of preparing the system for the unexpected. Now, lest you conclude that by proclaiming the inextricable connection between error and knowledge, I'm preaching that the virtue is vice, let me offer a few examples of the sort of thing I'm talking about. Most of the people who came to America, other than the people who came across the Bering Bridge, the European people who came, stayed in towns. That's where the towns came from. Most of the people who did not live in towns worked the land. Very few people, considered aberrant, defective, dysfunctional by the rest, got it wrong. And rather than living in the towns or working on the land and earning an honest buck, they skulked around the edges of civilization, discovering the resources of the new continent and blazing the trails that the rest of the population would later follow. You know. By way of contrast, let me tell you about the prehistoric Chinese bronze caster. After his drunken studentship, he was sent to some distant province to do his thing. The snag is that he was a little off colour when they did the bit about recognising ores, and to be honest, he can't remember exactly what copper ore looks like. So, to prevent or at least delay a scandal, he puts some rocks in his furnace, builds up a terrible heat. But nothing happens. It's not copper ore. He builds up more heat and more heat. Building up heat's the only thing he knows how to do, because it's the only thing he knows how to do. Then, bam! White hot metal starts to flow from the overheated furnace, because he happens, in his delirium, to have loaded his furnace with local, high sulfur, low melting point iron ore. And that's how the Chinese prehistoric iron casting industry was born. Human ambivalence towards innovators is evident in the legend of Prometheus, whom the myth makers doomed to eternal torment for stealing fire from the gods for the benefit of humankind. Would you really may ask the question, is the creative individual a vital force, a menace, a bumbling idiot, or a bit of all three? Well, some writers throw on that question by early experiments in the development of this theory. When I joined the team of my mentor and colleague, Professor Peter Allen, he and Professor Jackie McGlade were working on a computer model of the Nova Scotia fishing grounds. They discovered that with modern communications, it was possible to concentrate fishing fleets in fish-rich areas, guaranteeing big catches and local extinction of the fish population. An additional downside feature emerged. Having exterminated their prey, the fleets had absolutely no idea of where to go to kill something next. Their catches plummeted as they dispersed in search of other fish-rich areas. However, those few aberrant fishermen who did not join in the fleet concentration, and whose catch may not have been as great as the rest of the pack, now come into their own, as they and they alone possess information about the present location of fresh fish-rich zones. And they alone can call the fleet together over more fish. Their presence in the fleet materially increases its efficiency as a fish-killing system. However, although the scout captains who provide this essential function could be heroes, it is as possible that they've missed the harvest because the skipper is such a skinflint that he bought a cheap radio which broke down and missed the signal to concentrate. It is irrelevant. The skipper could be drunk, he could be stupid, he could be stubborn, he could be insane. The only thing that's important is that the people in the wrong, non-optimal places are the people who keep the system going. My friend, excuse me. Lovely, I never thought I'd enjoy a glass of water. My final example brings us to a theoretical computer model. Imagine a net with a mesh a metre aside. Lay it over some countryside, the Downs, the Sahara, anywhere. Write the height above sea level of each metre square on the countryside on a piece of graph paper in the place that corresponds to the position of the metre square on the ground. What you have is a model of the contours of the landscape in numbers. Instead of a landscape of high numbers on a grid map representing places, instead of a landscape, the high numbers on the grid could represent places where a lot of honey had been spilled on a kitchen table. Now, if the table did not get cleaned for a long time, then the map would help us to predict which parts of the table would grow the deepest mold. That is to say, the numbers now represent a resource map of the table with respect to the mold. One of the things that computer models makers do is to make little mathematical robots whose rules of behavior are designed to cause them to go to the highest concentration of a resource. This game is often called a hill climbing experiment. Now, it's not trivial, in that if the landscape is at all corrugated, then it's very difficult to to devise a set of rules that will in fact achieve this apparently simple object. The problem goes like this. You wind up your little robot containing some version of the instruction move in the direction of upwards. You set it loose, let's say, at the foot of Mont Blanc. As you walk away to have your tea, you hear a little voice behind you shouting, I've done it, I'm there. Oh no, you think, you can't have got there yet. This is malfunction, not success. You return and find your robot perched on the top of a fence post in the car park from which you let it run. Now the robot, there's no laughing, that's unkind. The robot is right in thinking that it solved the problem in the terms which it was positive. It's down on every side of the post. There is no direction that it can go will satisfy the rule. It's one as far as the program goes at the top of Mont Blanc. This is the problem of local maxima, small peaks. And there are lots in any corrugated landscape. It exemplifies the question, how can a system go beyond itself? And behind this lurks the somewhat more awesome question, how can new things come into the world? Or in spatial terms, what are the conditions in which symmetry breaking occurs? Put positively, we may ask, what sort of rule can we give our robot to stop it getting stuck on pimples? The solution is that the little model robot must be made to be naughty, defective, aberrant, etc. It must be programmed to break its own rule. Sure, it must go up, but from time to time it must also go down. Robots which occasionally break their own rules are better at hill climbing than those which obey them implicitly, because they don't get stuck on the first pimple they come to. This is a good example of a system which performs better after the injection of a little chaos. In fact, it's a noise stabilizer or noise optimized system. Please note that the one price that you pay for this improvements in final performance is unpredictability. The robot's downhill adventures should occur randomly for the best results. In order to explore the possibilities that hill climbing simulations seem to offer, Peter Allen and I have tried to develop a model of evolution itself. The model we developed is a cellular automaton, surprise, surprise. It can also be described as a spatialized differential equation, and for a laugh, I've actually brought the equation along. You're going to love this. Okay, there's the equation. Have a look at that. I'm scrolling over after that. Okay. Now, I'm going to do some more drawing in front of each other. That's so easy now. Just talk amongst yourselves for a moment. Oh, here we are. I found it. It's all right. Now, here, I've got a prompt sheet as well to help me. Lovely. Okay. I'll do it. Now, the model we developed is a cellular geometry. It can also be described as a spatialized differential equation. Its space is not a kitchen table smeared with honey, but a space full of resources which are available to populations with the right qualities. It's a map of environmental niches, and it's an example of the wonderful versatility of cellular automata. You really can put what values you like in the cells. It has two dimensions, so it's a sort of plane, not this, right? This is the one point sheet. I want you to forget that, never happened. It's got two dimensions. This is really big, this one here is, okay, it's a matrix, of course, it's got little layers, it's got values in order to turn into colours and pictures. And it represents two qualities. Say size of beak in one direction. So here we've got little guys with little beaks, and here we've got guys with really great beaks. Okay, that's along this axis here. Those are those qualities. And let's say that its size of wing is the quality that we represent here. Here you've got little wings, and here you've got huge wings. Okay, there we are. That's the matrix. Yes, that's very good. Now we can start to talk about the sort of resources underneath this. Here you've got a little bird, right, with little wings, and he eats small seeds. And up here you've got a big bird with small wings, and he probably eats coconuts or something. Here you've got a bird with a very small beak, you see, very big wings, it's very fast. fast-flying insects. And here you've got this bird, he's got huge wings and a huge beak. He eats parking meter attendants. Now, it's the biology over. In real life, things have innumerable qualities. In the model, only two. Now, this is the charm of the model. A good model simplifies the situation by exposing essential elements. Our model begins in an unpopulated space. Movement across the space represents a change in form, in shape. The shape of the creatures, with a comparatively narrow range of behaviours, such as birds, relate very strongly with their activities. The eyes of a bird of prey face front, whilst those of its prey tend to be on the side of their heads. Birds with big, strong beaks eat big, strong seeds. We can think of these aspects of the bird as skills. In this case, they're physical skills, and we're really now talking about kind of spatial information. The skills are behaviours. The behaviours give access to resources. There are parts of the bird, such as a big beak, which give it access to the resource, big hard nuts or parking meter attendants. To be able to think of our space as skill space also allows us to interpret the output of the model in the human social context. Because although the shape of human beings does not reveal all that much about our behaviour, we do spend a lot of time exercising skills that give access to resources. The model as we come to it represents an environment offering a range of as yet unexploited resources. The first thing we must do is to seed the model. That is to place some population in the grid. Every cell in our automata has the same rules. They're universal rules, and they're the set of laws of the model universe whose evolution we're going to examine. Each cell in our model universe is going to come together to test the ideas of Darwin. The first rule of every cell in the grid is that the population grows. There is a birth rate augmented with a term that represents positive feedback, which controls the rate of increase of the population. This positive feedback term, which seems a bit like wearing two hats, is in fact a vital detail of the model. It is this term which models the mechanism that causes peacocks to have long tails, although long tails have no adaptive advantage except that peahens happen to like them. It seems possible that human artistic, sporting, and military activities are of this sort. All it takes is that some people can do it and that other people are prepared to encourage it. Survival is irrelevant. Finally, under Rule 1, the populations do not grow to infinity, but are constrained at some preset level determined by what resources are available. This is the local niche limit. The second rule is that a proportion of the population from each cell swaps over into adjacent cells. This is how we represent mutation, as a spreading or diffusion through shape space. Mutation is shape drift through time. This diffusion through shape space is random and thus chaotic. The third rule is that the population in any cell draws resource not only from that cell in which it is located, but also diminishing with distance from all the cells in the matrix. This represents the fact that although a bird may have a beak optimized for cracking big, hard seeds, it doesn't get struck by lightning if it gobbles the odd small insect. We presume that creatures will probably try everything of which they're physically capable. A characteristic implies a behavior. It doesn't disqualify a creature from other behaviors. It just indicates that that behavior will probably be more frequent. If you're wondering what happens to the population that fall off the edge, don't worry, they don't fall off the edge, that is. They don't fall off the edge because there are no edges. Can you see this bit of paper? That the left edge of the matrix is connected to the right. I was going to draw this, but it's not easy to draw like this. The left edge of the matrix connects to the right edge of the matrix, which makes it a tube so that any guy who wanders off the top just falls onto the bottom. And you then turn this round and connect the other two edges. It's very easy to do like this, but easy to turn it into. So that if the guys wander off the top, and etc., 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 and what you get is a torus. The thing looks like a donut. Now, can you turn the video projector on? Is it on? I have to give you a warning to turn it on, I think. Because I'm going to ask for a video in a short time. Right. Now, I'm now you a video of the run of this model that we've just been spending all this time talking about. And this was executed on a MASPAR parallel computer with about 8,000 simultaneous processing units. I did this stuff at the experimental computer section at NASA Goddard Jet Propulsion Laboratories in Washington with a guy called Jack Corliss, who worked with a very, very clever graphics programmer called Dave Cape. And he did this visualization that you're going to see. Now, the rule pick for this model was a very good choice. You'll see that two very satisfactory things happen. The first is that although this is a very highly diffusive, very chaotic equation, which is to say that a whole lot of population is slopping about all over the thing, despite this, we see the formation of dense concentrations of population surrounded by areas where population is virtually absent. These population-rich areas surrounded by unpopulous zones indicate the emergence of chaotic or strange attractors. What we have here is the spontaneous occurring of a process akin to the formation of species. This is the sort of thing we hope the model will do. Furthermore, and in addition, these population-rich zones exhibit crisp bifurcations. In other words, we don't have to search the fossil remains for dats and cods whose existence and subsequent extinction are rather important essential to the theory. It may well be that when a new species emerges, it does so without creating a slew of intermediate forms. Okay, let's have a look at this video. Ooh. Well, there's going to be some credits. I hope we might be able to avoid the credits, but I'm sorry. Ooh. The credits at the beginning and the thank you. The credits. Oh, stop. Press right. Okay, that's good. Now, okay. So here we go. You can see it happening. There you've got you've got all these numbers floating around, and yet it's forming these dense areas, and nothing between them. You know, we see these blue clouds we talk about them. So what you get here is instead of having porridge, you get something that looks like a set of species coherently spaced out with no intervening anything. Very, very remarkable. But good news, you know, Darwin was even righter than he thought. Look, okay, I think you can stop that, Nick. Thanks. I'm going to, can the house lights come on? Oh, that's very good. Yeah, that's very good. Just to give you an idea of what was happening there in terms of, in literal terms, each sheet of the grid filled with calculated values is a generation, and it's loaded onto the bottom of a stack, which goes downwards as time goes on. That's how they did that. They did that visualization. This method of visualization, persistent features, the blobs, representing distinct species, become streaks. And the picture which spontaneously forms has a very close correspondence to the way Darwin represented evolving species in that picture I showed you earlier on. This is very, very satisfactory. The rule chosen for this model seems to make a universe whose behavior corresponds to the theory. It demonstrates an exclusion mechanism, which may throw light on the rather mysterious fact of speciation. But all of this is no more than an illustration of what was already known or supposed. In order to repay all the effort spent in the development of the model, see if I can find the show. Yeah, that's like it off. Right there. No. In order to repay the effort, in order to repay the effort spent in the development of the model, it should do more, that's the model, than feedback what's already been told. To be interesting, it must show something that corresponds with some aspect of the situation which the makers did not expect. In this case, we had paid out with these here blue clouds, very strange. And they've got these attractors sprouting out of the bottom of them. What are these blue clouds and where do they come from? These new species look as if they come from nowhere, but in fact, the whole matrix is permeated with a very thin skin of diffuse population, which in the model is transparent. Positive feedback works on randomly formed concentrations and a new attractor crystallizes, a new species, fashion, industry, joke, or war, or what have you is born. These are what you might call sudden events in evolution. What this seems to indicate is that whilst a meteor, volcano, or some other event from outside of the system may be sufficient to cause large rearrangements in the biosphere, such events are not necessary for that outcome to occur. This theory of spontaneous sudden events is no competitor to the meteor theory. It's perfectly possible both that something from the outside can kill a lot of creatures, and that in the ordinary course of the play of shifting resources, evolving systems are capable of sudden and large internal arrangements, although their exterior circumstances appear to be changing smoothly and slowly. The sudden fall of the Shah of Persia, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the fall of the Mexican peso are cases in point. Earlier, I asked the question, how then do species, whatever that means, prepare for an unknown future, and how can we design those? Now it's possible to offer some sort of an answer. In the first place, species, whatever that means, are not separate from their future. Species, whatever that means, do not have an unknown future. Species are an unknown future, each other's and their own. In the second part, we are one of those species. Despite the hypothesis of a chaotic universe of unpredictable causality, in which we have to abandon the idea of simple linear chains of causality, strategies emerge. Beautiful strategies. Abandon the idea that nature optimizes everything. Forget about the survival of the fittest. Forget about fitness. The intricate, chancy patterns of evolution bear no resemblance to a race or a competition of any kind at all. From the dense interplay of living things, we can see that variety is good, that variety is worth encouraging, worth paying for, and however dangerous it looks, variety is much safer than imposed arbitrary structure. Finally, this is not only the world of flux. It seems possible that sudden, unpredictable, violent, large-scale events are a perfectly natural component of the behavior of complex systems. To sum up, our work seems to encourage a position of extreme tolerance. Toleration is the key to variety. We don't have to work to be various. Nature's taken care of that. But clearly we must try to refrain from prohibiting and punishing that which does not conform to our own taste. Without conformity, we have no culture. But that culture, that conformity, can only protect itself by surrounding itself with a cloud of forms deviant to itself. Far from being in competition, the deviant and the orthodox are both essential to a durable system. Such a system is not only capable of surviving modifications to its fundamental resource requirements, it can enjoy the magical freedom of conscious self-transformation. Thank you for listening so much.
I enjoy that enormously. Well, the sort of the way we'll be doing this is to take
symbolic. I don't know any of this stuff. I don't think anybody does.
Well, it's just that when we're looking at any system, we tend to look from our own point of view as the way we're looking at it. And the human beings tend to look at systems in different ways. So I'm just interested in that other way of looking at any system you're looking at.
Yes, I think that the fact is that these patterns that are there are sense, the only sense, and the stuff that we do to each other is kind of froth on the top of that sense. They're the inexorable and fundamental working out of the way. There's pictures of in a catalogue of symmetries in three dimensions here. That's very similar to the way I see the workings out of these cellular automata patterns. They're like log tables. They're just grinding out the inexorable ways in which. Yeah, I'm not going on talking forever. Is that useful at all?
I think I'll leave it at that point. Let's go to the bar for us.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
May I ask you about the Blue Plague? How long does it take? I mean, what was the length of time represented in the first video? Millennia? 100 years?
It didn't happen that way, did it? People learned to put contraceptives on
What?
very quickly. It's because the fact is, the question of, see, that's a non-mutating plague, so that the plague there could only travel with its vectors. It could only travel with the people who were being infected. What would have happened if the plague had mutated as well? I couldn't get any funding for this, and so we never were able to go on with it. We were able to show a long time. I mean, in the beginning, when people said, all you have to do is change your ways, and it won't be a threat. It sounds so easy. We wanted to show, we wanted to try and prove that that was the case, that if you changed your behaviour, you could escape from an infection. And it did turn out to be true. But it's atemporal, the model. Cellular automata, I mean, time in cellular automata is something that I'm sure we could have a whole other lifetime on.
Right.
There was one term, I mean, we've got a very mixed audience, and some are very familiar with cellular automata, but I think possibly your use early on of the notion of attractors in the context of cellular automata.
Yes, you're quite right.
And your first colour diagram, I think perhaps you could expand on that for a couple of sentences. That might be very useful.
Okay, there's a very beautiful description by René Thomas of an attractor. I'm not sure it makes any sense. An attractor is an area of state space in which trajectories are rich. Okay, if you take the pendulum and you let it go, it doesn't matter how you throw it, you get a different trajectory. It can go wuzz, 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 wuzz. In the end, it's going to end up directly below its point of suspension. There is an attractor in the system. And in fact, you can map all the behavior. All you need to know is the angle at which you launch it, or the velocity at which you launch it. And you can predict the entire trajectory of the pendulum. And it's a system which has a point attractor, that is, in the end, whatever it's going to do, wuzz, 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 because of friction it will come back to this point attractor. If you did this with no friction and no gravity, then you'd have some kind of cyclic attractor, and it would go on whizzing round and round and round forever.
Well, would you like to put the slide back a second and just try and.
Oh no, I'm sorry, John. No, definitely no, because it's possible, because it's too complicated. I don't understand this. Nobody does. I'm not particularly stupid.
That's a bar question then.
Yes, also.
Any other
Surely what you were saying pointed towards knowledge as being something which holds back. Knowledge is superfluous. You simply fulfill your purpose. That thinking too much about it might actually be forming a barrier in front of the simple process of being what is, what any system simply is what it is.
Now, I think I'm supposed to pretend that I understand what you've said and just say anything to you, but I didn't properly hear your question.
Right.
Would you like to repeat it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We've been stating all along that for something to be a positive, there has to be a negative there.
Am I? Do you mean to say that every time they bang somebody up in jail, they release someone?
Well, for somebody to be put in jail, there has to be somebody free.
No, it doesn't. Everybody could be in jail. For goodness sake, why isn't your young people? Why isn't it happening?
But then it wouldn't be a punishment if everyone was in jail.
Well, you should go there. It's hell. I'm sorry. I don't believe that there's any hydrostatic balance in the universe. I don't believe that because something happens somewhere. Oh, God, look. There are some conserved quantities in the universe. Thermal energy is conserved. conserved. Mass energy is conserved. Information, I don't believe is a conserved quantity. And I think it's very awkward because I think information has crept like a child into this parliament of the conserved quantities in the universe, and I don't believe that information is conserved.
Can I try and restate that question? You actually said yourself, Mike, something along the lines that those in non-optimal places are those that are keeping the system running.
Yes.
Therefore, the implication I take from that question was, what is the point of striving to be in an optimal place if you're better off actually influencing the system from a non-optimal position?
Okay. Right at the end, I did say that if you don't have culture, you don't need your front of error makers. I think that there has to be a system. I mean, if there's no fishing fleet, there wouldn't be any error makers. You require both. There's an extraordinary kind of play between them. If everybody was, we ran the model where everybody was an error maker, where the fleets, one of the things we did was to make the fleets, when you concentrate, we made them lie to each other. They were wonderful. You've got this IBM PC and there's 500 fishermen inside it, all telling each other lies. And the catch goes down. I mean, if you want to kill all the fish in the sea, then the thing to do is to have most of your birds. The amount of error makers you need is a really interesting question, like how much is an optimal rate of mutation? It depends on the rate of change of the environment in which the system itself is. If the system is in a very fast rate of change, then you need a lot of mutation to keep up, and if the system's in a slow rate of change, if there was no rate of change at all, if the environment wasn't changing at all, you wouldn't need any mutation at all. In the case of the error makers, there's an optimum number of error makers, and it depends, scouts, and it depends on the locale. I mean, one of the questions that I would not discuss with people, war games planners from the Pentagon, who were at a meeting that I was at, was like, they said, oh wow, this is very relevant militarily, this will tell us how many scouts we need, etc. And obviously I wasn't prepared to talk to them about that, and I very much recommend that you don't talk to